Ladies and gentlemen, this is a warning. Thank you.
Hey, police, Trooper Fry.
There's somebody after me.
Okay, where are you?
Please, stop it, please. Please stop.
Hello?
This call, lasting 23 minutes, would spark what has become one of the biggest serial killer cases in recent history. Shannon Gilbert was a 24-year-old sex worker who called the cops after fleeing her client's home in May 2010. Police would assign Officer John Malia and his cadaver dog Blue to searching the area around the private community of Oak Beach over that summer. And finally, in December that year, the dog found something, but it wasn't Shannon. Police would uncover 4 skeletons within 500 feet of each other. The following year, 6 more bodies would be found before Shannon's was finally recovered in December 2011. What if this was just the tip of the iceberg? What if the Long Island serial killer had been active for some 30 years before he was discovered? In 2023, a suspect was arrested for the original Gilgo 4, but the question remains, was it the Long Island serial killer or the Long Island serial killers?
Goes on in San Francisco for the man known as the Zodiac Killer.
There could be a serial killer in Chicago.
The Oakland County child killer.
Phantom Killer.
Frankfurt slasher.
4 children have now been murdered.
Has killed 5 and says he's going to kill again.
15 brutally murdered young women.
The pattern is the same.
One by one,
the death count started rising.
A man in a mask robbed, tied, and stabbed them.
Strangled, stuffed in burlap bags.
It is highly unlikely that these women were murdered by separate men.
Where will the killer strike next?
Police can't answer who or why.
That's the question that we'll never know.
I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering if this person's going to be caught.
I believe that there's someone out there that has knowledge.
And he's probably still at large.
If you know Maureen Road, you know we value our privacy. But in our personal life, it's not always easy to maintain. Whether we know it or not, sites will mine our data like full name, email, health records, and more, which they will sell to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who wants to snoop. That's why we started using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows us which data brokers are selling our personal information and automatically submits opt-out requests on our behalf. This not only reduces the amount of spam you'll get, but protects against hackers who can use this information to gain access to our social media, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also provides a ton of other features bundled into one easy-to-use app at an affordable price. You get antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without needing to bother with different apps. We all have one or more of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. And if you're a regular viewer, you'll know how often that happens. Like 24-hour security, motion sensors, and guard dogs, Aura is always on, doing the hard work of keeping my info safe so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. Relaxing. Theruinroad values our privacy, and we also value yours. Go to aura.com/ruinroad to start a free 2-week trial, also linked below in the description. With victims being found years after their murders and constant theorizing about possible extra victims, going over this case was a monumental task, and in order to distill it into a coherent narrative, we'll be going chronologically over every murder that bears similarities. While it is unlikely that all of these people were victims of the same killer, as long as their cases remain unsolved, we'll never know. It was February 1st, 1982 when 19-year-old Tina Foglia was last seen at the Hammerheads music venue in West Islip, New York at 3 a.m. Though her family didn't like it, she had hitchhiked there and planned to do the same on the way home. 2 days later, a highway worker spotted 3 trash bags placed along the off-ramp of Southern State Parkway on the Sagatos Parkway. As he approached, he saw hair protruding from one of the bags and called police. Inside, they would discover the dismembered body of Tina. Her death would be determined to be from asphyxiation, and then her body had been cut up with a precision instrument, similar to a butcher knife. In 2017, an unknown male's DNA that was found in the bags was stated as hoping to be run against familial DNA sites, but as of yet has not had any matches. They also stated they could not rule out Tina as a victim of Lisk, but were not pursuing that avenue. Also in 2017, police would convict John Bittroff for 2 murders in the 1990s, and he's suspected of a 3rd. Later in the year, he would be announced as a suspect in the Lisk murders.
Good evening, I'm Christine Johnson.
Welcome back, I'm Dick Brennan, in for Maurice Dubois. That Long Island man stands accused of 2 murders 2 decades ago.
CBS 2's Carolyn Gussoff has more now on the Suffolk County carpenter suspected of being a serial killer.
Bittroff was named the accused killer in a cold case murder. He was plucked from a typical suburban life. A husband, father of 2 boys, 1 college-bound, a carpenter with friendly neighbors.
We both became friends quickly, and he's a nice guy. He has a nice wife, good kids.
He did my upstairs bathroom.
George O'Toole says he never suspected the man, but then with homes in Manorville acres apart, surrounded by woods, you don't really know your neighbors.
Believe me, he was pleasant. And that was the crazy part of it, that he really fooled us.
But prosecutors say you can't fool DNA. Bittroff is now charged with 2 murders and is a suspect in a 3rd. 3 women beaten, strangled, and left nude in unique poses 20 years ago. The case cracked after Bittroff's brother, arrested in a recent unrelated crime, was required to submit a DNA sample.
We now have positive scientific DNA confirmation that the brother, John Bittroff, is the killer.
An avid hunter with a house upstate, an animal lover. The guy always hosting family in a home he built himself. Neighbors say he's a happy-go-lucky guy, and they hope there's been a mistake. But prosecutors say there's more than a DNA match. There's other evidence linking him to the killings, which they have yet to detail. In Yaphank, Long Island, Carolyn Gussoff, CBS 2 News.
It was November 1st, 1993, when 31-year-old Rita Tangretti was last seen hitchhiking along the Montauk Highway in East Patchogue. Just south of the highway is this quiet subdivision. Back in 1993, it was abandoned and largely overgrown area used by sex workers. 2 days after going missing, a man was riding his ATV through here when he came to this area to discover a horrific sight. Rita's legs were spread apart, and her arms were positioned above her head. Her skull had been shattered, and flecks of wood chips were found on her body. Her underwear and left shoe were missing. 18 days later, hunters walking in the woods of Southampton came upon a now familiar sight. The partially clothed body of a strangled woman lay on the ground. She would be identified as 28-year-old Sandra Costello. Though she did not have a record for prostitution, police noted she was a transient who displayed many characteristics similar to Tangretti. Just over a month later, on January 5, 1994, 20-year-old Colleen McNamee would last be seen entering a blue car outside the now demolished Blue Dawn Diner in Islandia. Though she was described as a good student in high school, after graduating she had fallen into drugs and prostitution, for which she was attending a rehab program. An anonymous phone call to police at the end of the month would point them to this patch of the woods just past exit 68 on the Long Island Expressway, where her body would be found 200 yards off the road, precisely where this new construction is. Just like Rita Tangretti, she had been killed by a blow to the head. She had cigarette burns on her right hand and was left in the same pose. One of her shoes was missing too. Police noted the similarities instantly and linked the 2 murders, stating they also believed Sandra Costello's to be linked. It would not be until 2014 that police would match DNA collected to that of Manorville resident John Bittroff, who lived in this secluded house at 167 Silas Carter Road. Since a child, Crazy Johnny B, as he was known, had a penchant for violence. He tortured animals, was expelled from high school, convicted for grand larceny, and had assaulted someone with a baseball bat. But in 1995, he got married and had his first of 2 sons the following year. Was that enough to get Bittroff to stop killing? Or did it just make him change his method of disposal? It was April 20th, 1996 when 2 men who were summering on the coastal Fire Island were walking along the Blue Point Beach. While averaging below 300 full-time residents, the population of the island balloons to thousands of vacationers in the summer months, which prohibits motor vehicles. The two brothers came upon a trash bag that was floating just offshore. Inside were a pair of women's legs. On April 11, 2011, as part of the Gilgo Beach search, a skull was found 92 feet off the Ocean Parkway here that would be confirmed as belonging to the same woman, thus making her the first confirmed victim of Lisk.
We have breaking news. Law enforcement is giving an update at a press conference in the Gilgo Beach murders. We're expecting to hear Suffolk County authorities talk about the identity of another victim in this investigation. Let's listen.
Today, we are here to announce that as part of the Gilgo Task Force re-examination of all the evidence in the case, we were able to identify Fire Island Jane Doe as Karen Vergata, who was 34 years old at the time of her disappearance. And I believe we have a picture of Miss Vergata. And I think it's important that we remember and honor not only Miss Vergata, but all the victims on Gilgo Beach. Ms. Vergata went missing at approximately February 14th, 1996. At the time, she lived on West 45th Street in Manhattan and was believed to be working as an escort at the time of her disappearance. There was no missing persons complaint filed at the time of that disappearance.
Just over a year after the legs were found, on June 28, 1997, a family was spending the day at Hempstead Lake Park when they would make a horrific discovery. After the kids became bored at the annual fishing clinic, 45-year-old Shell Bosch took his friend's children for a walk in the woods when they smelled something rotting. Today, the tree line has been cut back further, removing the distinctive bent tree where a green Rubbermaid container was sitting with a garbage bag draped over it. After telling the kids to get back, Shell noticed flies swarming around it and decided to go find a park ranger. Inside, they would find the torso of an African-American female between 16 and 30 years old, along with a floral print afghan and red towel. The most distinct identifier was a small tattoo of a pair of peaches above her left breast. She also had a scar from a cesarean surgery along her abdomen. This would come into play when, on April 4, 2011, the skeleton of a young girl between 1 and 4 years old was found wrapped in a blanket, dead of undetermined causes, just into the brush on Ocean Parkway. She was wearing this gold jewelry. Gold jewelry would also be found on the limbs of peaches that were discovered 7 days later, just before the sign for Jones Beach State Park, almost exactly 8 miles away from her child and the furthest apart remains found on Gilgo Beach. In October 2022, the FBI announced that they had linked the pair to be descendants of a deceased man in Alabama and were looking to speak to relatives of Elijah Howell. 16-year-old Jacqueline Ashley Smith had been reported missing from her Brooklyn home on August 12, 1999. 10 months later, on June 20, 2000, a land surveyor found a suspicious bag in an overgrown empty lot, either at the corner of Rockaway Beach Boulevard and Beach 88th or 87th Streets in Queens. Inside was the torso of Smith, though she would not be identified until sometime between 2008 and 2018. Sadly, no other information exists on her case, and she has never been officially linked. Meanwhile, on November 19, 2000, 3 pheasant hunters headed down this trailway off Halsey Manor Road. They continued down this utility pole road and turned south on this trail when their dog picked up a scent. The unofficial trails are used by locals to hike, hunt, drive trucks or dirt bikes down, and walk your horses, along with the dumping of trash. But that day, dumped along the roadside at the first trail intersection were several trash bags. Inside was the dismembered torso of a nude female. Police would search the surrounding woods for hours, finding clothes scattered about along the road, but no further remains. 4 days later, however, hunters would find the body of a still unknown John Doe in the woods nearby who died of strangulation. His case is not believed to be linked. On April 4th, 2011, the skull, right foot, and hands of the Manorville Jane Doe would be found along Gilgo Beach, just 45 feet away from where Baby Doe was found. It would not be until May 29, 2020 that she would be identified as 24-year-old Valerie Mack. The adopted mother of one had become a sex worker in New Jersey and last spoken with her family in the spring or summer of 2000 when she said she was going to New York to meet a guy. After Valerie, things seem to have gone silent for 2 years. It was December 2002 when police in Queens received a call about a torso in what was then a vacant lot off of the boardwalk. In 2012, the lot was redeveloped as this condominium association. But a decade earlier, responding officers would find the body of a large male dressed in a skirt off of Beach 63 Street wrapped in plastic. January 25th the following year, ice skaters would spot something protruding from the water along the eastern bank of this pond in Mauritius, over 50 miles from the lot in Queens. It would turn out to be that body's severed head. A single bullet had gone through the temple. Shortly after, his arms and legs would be found in an unspecified location somewhere in Suffolk County. 1 year later, police made a sketch of the unknown male and distributed it among the transvestite community. Before long, they had a name. 25-year-old Andre Jamal Isaac stood 6 feet 3 inches tall and was a professional dancer who won many local competitions. His smaller friends referred to him as Sugar Bear because he was a gentle giant. Last seen just before Thanksgiving 2002, he left his home to meet a secret friend in a red sports car. While Lisk's victims are almost all petite young women, at least one future victim would be a transvestite. Could they have catfished the killer, or were they copycat crimes? Back in Manorville, it was July 26, 2003, when another torso was found. Just half a mile from where Valerie Mack was found, a woman walking her dog along this old Long Island Expressway access road found the naked torso lying atop a pile of tree branches at the end where the road curves and ends. This time, it was on full display, with just a sheet of plastic below it. Her killer had attempted to slash up a tattoo on her hip, which police released a sanitized version to the public in the hopes of identifying her, and it paid off almost immediately. At the age of 19, Jessica Taylor left her childhood home in Poughkeepsie, New York, with dreams of becoming a singer and actress. Unfortunately, she fell on drugs and began working for a pimp by the name of Remy in NYC and along the East Coast. She was last seen soliciting services at the Manhattan Port Authority bus terminal in July 21, 2003, just 5 days before her torso was found. On March 29th, Jessica's head, hands, and forearm would be discovered on Gilgo Beach, just east of Hemlock Cove. Again, after Jessica, things seemed to have gone quiet. Was the killer frightened after a quick identification? It would be another 2 years before the next possible victim. 21-year-old Jamie Diane Seymour called her father on July 22, 2005 from Brick, New Jersey to tell him she was on her way to the Port Authority area of New York, where Jessica Taylor and another future victim were both last seen. Little else is known about Jamie, apart from the fact she had been living in a transient lifestyle recently before her disappearance. To this day, no trace of the woman has ever been found. Another 2 years later, a mother and a child were walking along Harbor Island Beach in Mamaroneck in Westchester County. The local area had seen 4 inches of rain recently and had suffered from flooding, causing a number of things to wash ashore, including this suitcase. Inside was the torso of another female, this time believed to be a heavy-set Hispanic or African American woman between the ages of 35 and 50 years old. Also in the suitcase was a nightie, a pair of pants, and a shirt. She had been stabbed in the torso and had a tattoo of 2 cherries on her right breast, which police released to the public yet again in the hopes of identifying her. On March 27th, a fisherman along the Lloyd Harbor in Westchester would find a human leg belonging to Cherry's. The next day, a caretaker for Cablevision Systems founder James Dolan would discover the other leg wrapped in plastic and washed ashore on his estate in Cove Neck, across the bay from where the other leg was. No further remains have been found, nor has her identity been determined. 4 months later, 25-year-old Maureen Brainard-Barnes checked into what was then the Super 8 Times Square Hotel in Manhattan. Along with her friend Sarah, the pair used room 406 as the meeting spot for escorts on their Craigslist ads. Maureen was hoping to make enough money to pay her back rent and stop her eviction proceedings at her apartment at 180 Prospect Street in Norwich, Connecticut. After 3 days, Sarah left to go home, but Maureen decided she would stay through Wednesday. In the time since the story, Maureen's last known communication has changed. Originally, the story was she had been robbed and phoned her sister at the Penn Station saying she would take a train home. However, her sister was unaware of her sex work. In 2020, when new information was released, the official story stated that on July 9th, Maureen had called a friend to tell them she was leaving the motel to meet a client somewhere else. 2 weeks later, Sarah would receive a phone call from an unlisted number. On the other end of the phone, a man asked if she knew Maureen and said she was fine, having just been seen at a quote, whorehouse in Queens. Sarah knew that was unlikely, and the man said he would call back with the address. He never did. Maureen's phone, however, would be discovered to have been pinged off a cell phone tower on Fire Island when it was believed her killer tried to access her voicemail between a week and 2 weeks after her disappearance. At the time of her discovery on December 13, 2010, she was believed to have been the first victim of the then-named Gilgo 4. Wrapped in burlap, at first the skeleton's gender could not be determined, but eventually would be identified, and it was stated she had died by strangulation. Almost a year after Maureen went missing, 39-year-old Tanya Rush left her apartment at the Van Dyke houses in Brooklyn at 3 a.m. on June 23, 2008. Surveillance cameras captured her exiting via the back of the building with an unknown male and female. The mother and known sex worker was last seen walking towards the subway station on Livonia Avenue. Four days later, a road crew found a suitcase dumped along the on-ramp to the westbound Southern State Parkway 19 miles to the east of her home. Inside was the dismembered corpse of Tanya. Investigators stated her murder showed a lot of rage, but would not go into specifics. "24-year-old Melissa Barthelemy was last seen on July 12, 2009, sitting on the steps outside of her basement apartment building in the Bronx at 1149 Underhill Avenue. Though she graduated as a hairstylist, when she moved to New York, she began stripping, which turned into sex work at Times Square and an adult friend finder. According to her pimp, she had lined up another client for the following night somewhere on Long Island for $1,000. Though he offered her a ride, she declined, saying it was a location and person that he knew. Melissa had plans to return to her family's home in Buffalo soon, and after her mother reported her missing on July 18th, Melissa's younger sister began to receive a series of malicious phone calls from her phone. The calls would be traced to being made near the Port Authority bus terminal and Penn Station. The caller continued to say things such as how her sister was a horrible person, that she was dead, and how he would watch her rot until a Buffalo television station aired the story, at which point he stopped calling. On December 11, 2010, Melissa's body would be the initial skeleton discovered by Blue the search dog along Ocean Parkway. It was initially believed to have been Shannon Gilbert, who would go missing on May 1st, 2010.
4 bodies have turned up on a Long Island beach, police beginning a wide-ranging search for clues. Police say 3 of the bodies badly decomposed. This discovery followed skeletal remains found days earlier. Authorities made the find as they investigated a missing persons report, looking for a 24-year-old woman from Jersey City. Shannon Gilbert was last seen in May. Police say the woman worked as a prostitute, arranging to meet a client on Fire Island, about a mile from Oak Beach, where the bodies were found.
While it is believed Shannon's case is unrelated, it is so intrinsically tied to this case that it cannot be left unmentioned. Growing up in Ellenville, New York, Shannon Gilbert was one of Marie Gilbert's 4 daughters. As she grew up, Shannon had a history of mental illness and had issues with drugs. By 2010, she had moved to Jersey City in New Jersey, where she had become a sex worker. It was 1 a.m. when she had her driver, Michael Pack, take her to the private community of Oak Beach for an appointment with Joseph Brewer. After arriving, Joseph and Shannon left in his car for about 15 minutes, during which time she phoned a CVS store 12 minutes drive time away. After returning to his home at number 8 The Fairway, Shannon had become agitated for a, quote, unknown reason around 4:45 a.m. Brewer would ask Pack to remove her from the house, but Shannon refused, saying they were trying to kill her. At this point, she dialed the 23-minute 911 call and fled from the house.
State police.
Yeah, there's somebody after me.
I'm sorry?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you, ma'am?
I don't know.
You're driving right now?
No, I'm inside the house.
I'm sorry?
I'm inside the house.
What house?
I don't know. You trace where I am.
No, I can't.
No. No. No, stop. No. Please. Can you shut the door?
I'll go upstairs. I'll go upstairs. You leave. I'm going to go upstairs. You leave. I'm going to go upstairs. Okay? You leave. Please. Please. Take care. All right. All right.
She ran east and banged on the door of Gus Coletti near the Association entrance.
Somebody here? You were here?
Yes, I live at Oak Beach in the association. There's a young girl about 14 years old running around here screaming, and there's some guy trying to follow her.
He too phoned 911, but Shannon continued to flee, now south down Anchor Way, last knocking on the door of Barbara Brennan, who called the police but did not answer the door.
Some woman is knocking at my door. She says she's in danger.
Do you know her or no?
No, I don't. I'm not letting her in.
By this time, Shannon had ended her call. Pack would give up looking and leave by the time police arrived at 5:40 a.m. Several days later, Shannon's mother received a phone call from another Oak Beach resident, Dr. Peter Hackett.
He said, my name is Dr. Peter Hackett, calling to see if your daughter Shannon is there. I said, no. I said, why? Who are you? And he said that he ran a wayward house for girls. Shannon was there. She was upset. He'd given her some medication to calm her down, and he was worried about her. Is she home?
Hackett was known to be someone who lied about his involvement with events, such as a fabrication he told about the 1996 TWA Flight 800 explosion over New York, where he claimed he had driven past police roadblocks to offer aid. He was also a strange character in other regards, such as this bizarre encounter with reporters.
Did you run a home for wayward girls?
Of course not.
So you didn't have anything to do with Shannon Gilbert's death?
Of course not.
We never quite got his side of the story, but we certainly got a shocking interview.
So you never ran a home for wayward girls?
Nope.
And you had nothing to do with Shannon Gilbert's death?
That's correct.
What about all the other girls?
Ah! Jesus!
What was that?
My defibrillator. You sons of
911.
No, don't. No, it's all right. No? I'm a doctor.
I'm calling 911.
You call 911, I'll refuse.
I'm going to call 911.
Please don't.
Please, doctor, let me call 911.
Okay. Would you find out? These guys caused me to have a defibrillation. Just take pictures of these clowns, would you?
It would be December 2011 when searchers finally found out what happened to Shannon. First, they found some of her clothes and cell phone in the marsh behind Hackett's home. 1 week later, further east, they found her skeleton in the thick, thorny brush between Oak Beach and Ocean Parkway. Lying face up and with damage to her bones consistent with strangulation, it would eventually be ruled Shannon died of unknown causes. Much of this brush was leveled during the time of the investigation, but some 14 years later, it has all regrown to the point it is impossible to walk through. All those mentioned as involved during the night of May 1st were ruled as innocent in the matter of her death.
Prevailing opinion in Shannon's death, while tragic, was not a murder and was most likely non-criminal.
While you would think with this and the subsequent police involvement, the killer would lay low or move his dumping grounds, it was just over a month after Shannon went missing, he struck again. 22-year-old mother of one Megan Waterman of Maine was staying in this Holiday Inn located on Howpage on Long Island. Megan had been convinced by her boyfriend and pimp, Akeem Cruz, to become a Craigslist sex worker and left that night to go on an out call while he was in Brooklyn. Her last known sighting leaving the hotel lobby was captured on surveillance tapes that were released to the public in 2022. She's seen exiting the hotel and heading towards a convenience store, at which time it was believed she was picked up by her killer. Her remains would be found 5 months later as one of the Gilgo 4. She had been strangled and wrapped in burlap. But she was not the most recent victim either. On September 2nd, 2010, 27-year-old Amber Lynn Costello left her home in North Babylon on Long Island to meet a client. She lived here with her sister and a male roommate, all of whom were heroin addicts. In order to not draw attention to their sex work, when women would meet their johns here, they would park down the street, which is what happened that night. Her roommate recounted that someone had been calling her all night and offered her $1,500, price much higher than her normal fee. When she did not return home by the following day, her sister assumed she was simply on drugs somewhere and did not report her missing. 3 months later, on December 13th, she would be found as the 4th victim in the Gilgo 4. Like the others, she had been strangled and put into a burlap sack.
The FBI is offering to help New York homicide investigators as they chase a possible serial killer after 4 women's bodies were found dumped alongside this remote beach highway. Suffolk County Police discovered the first body on Saturday, the other 3 on Monday, while following up on reports of 2 missing prostitutes. Authorities say one of the missing was Shannon Gilbert of Jersey City, New Jersey. Meanwhile, the mother of Megan Waterman, a 22-year-old escort from Maine, says she is holding out hope that her child is still alive.
Now that we're actually waiting for DNA results to come back, I think this is harder on my family than Megan just being missing.
Authorities say it could be months before they can positively identify the remains.
In the ensuing months, the investigation would identify the Gilgo 4 and state they believed a serial killer was behind the murders.
We're looking at that we could have a serial killer.
At the end of March and early April, investigators began searching further along Gilgo Beach, at which time they found the further remains of the previous victims, along with one victim we have not yet covered. Roughly 838 feet east of Megan Waterman were another set of still unidentified remains. Referred to as Asian Doe, the estimated 17 to 23-year-old male skeleton was found dressed in women's clothing. Having been killed by blunt force trauma to the head, police estimated his murder to have occurred between 2001 and 2006, putting his death on the timeline somewhere just before or after Jessica Taylor, and a year before Cherry's was found. The final possible victim would be discovered on January 23, 2013. This beach in Laddingtown is along the northern shore of Long Island. Here, between the inland marsh and several beach cottages, a woman was walking her dog when he picked up a scent. The dog would follow it to an object that had been here long enough to have roots grown into it. As the dog dug, it uncovered human remains.
A woman walking her dog found the skeletal remains that police believe belonged to a female who was in her 20s or 30s. The remains were found near Sheep Lane in Laddingtown, Long Island. Nassau County Police Lieutenant John Azada talked about any possible connection to the Gilgo Beach serial killer case.
It's much too early to say that we definitely have a connection.
The lieutenant said the body was buried and it's not known how long the body was there. Authorities found a 24-karat gold pig necklace. The lieutenant hopes the necklace will help identify the victim.
In the Chinese culture, the year of the pigs emulates different years. 1995, 1983, 1971.
This case is being treated as a homicide case. Sophia Hall, WCBS 880 News.
Police have not disclosed much in this case, simply saying they were wrapped in a particular type of material and the body showed signs of trauma. They would comb the surrounding beach for further remains, but came up negative. The body was deliberately buried sometime before 2012, but no clue to her identity has of yet been released. The years since have seen a number of developments in the case. On December 10, 2015, the FBI officially joined the Lisk investigation after being blocked for years by former Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke.
Dramatic fall from grace for the former Chief of Department for the Suffolk County Police. The highly decorated veteran officer admitted to roughing up a suspect and covering it up. CBS 2's Carolyn Gussoff has the new information from federal court on Long Island.
He acknowledges his lack of judgment and his failure in leadership.
Suffolk County's former top uniformed cop pleading guilty. Former Chief James Burke admitting in a strong voice in federal court he, quote, willfully used unreasonable force and slapped and hit a suspect, then conspired to cover it up.
It's outrageous and it's sad.
Vindication, says the attorney for Christopher Loeb.
The days of the corruption, the cover-ups, the abuse of power in Suffolk are over.
Burke now admits he beat Loeb, a burglary suspect who stole a duffel from Burke's SUV. The duffel contained the chief's gun belt, but also claimed Loeb, porn, and sex toys.
Every time I asked for a lawyer, I got hit again, I got hit again, I got choked, I got punched, I got slapped, I got kicked.
Chained and defenseless, his civil rights violated. The cover-up, 11 cops asked to lie to a grand jury. Under the plea deal, Burke will serve up to 51 months, a fraction of the 30 years he faced.
In later interviews, Loeb has alleged that he watched one of the DVDs featuring a masked man torturing a woman.
I saw what was on the DVD. He was embarrassed. Not only was he embarrassed, but he was scared.
Since then, many have tried to tie Burke as a suspect to the Lisk murders, including the family of Shannon Gilbert, who had found a private autopsy on their daughter, wherein the ME stated strangulation as a cause of death.
They say the 911 call and the fact that her clothing and purse were found far from her remains suggests foul play.
We'll wait till an autopsy is performed to know for sure what happened to her.
Sadly, the same year Burke would be sentenced for the tragedy struck the Gilbert family.
A grisly murder for a family already torn apart by tragedy. The mother of Gilgo Beach victim Shannon Gilbert found stabbed to death inside her home, and one of her own daughters is accused of the crime. CBS 2's Brian Coneybear has the story.
One family hit by two horrific crimes, the latest inside this Ulster County apartment house.
They catch the purse of the persons involved in Shannon's murder. Then they will also connect the other murders to Gilgo Beach, and we could stop a serial killer.
Mary Gilbert's mission was to find the serial killer she believed murdered her daughter Shannon on Long Island. But now the 52-year-old herself has been murdered, allegedly by another one of her daughters, Sarah Gilbert.
Think about it, a mother being murdered by her own child? Can there be anything that you can consider more horrible than that?
3 years ago, Sarah Gilbert spoke to CBS News about her sister's dangerous profession.
She pretty much thought that, like, it would never happen to her.
27-year-old Sarah Gilbert and her mother lived in separate apartments here at 9 Warren Street in Ellenville. Police say just after 2 p.m. Saturday, Mary was found dead in Sarah's apartment.
Mary was invited into Sarah's home, and in the living room, she was knifed to death.
Attorney John Ray says Sarah is schizophrenic, in and out of mental hospitals, and turned violent in recent months, even threatening to kill her 8-year-old son.
No, that's tragic. That's sad.
Sonny is a neighbor who knows Sarah and says everyone was surprised when she was released from a psychiatric hospital.
They let her go out, and not 3 months after that, she does this.
Sarah Gilbert is charged with second-degree murder in her mother's death, but no one has ever been arrested in her sister's killing 6 years ago. Reporting from Ellenville, Ulster County, Brian Conybeare, CBS 2 News.
In the following years, information has been more forthcoming on the investigation. In 2022, new police commissioner Rodney Harrison announced the formation of the Gilgo Beach Homicide Investigation Task Force, a joint effort by Suffolk PD and the FBI.
I'm very confident it's going to help us identify a suspect going into the near future.
The multi-agency panel includes investigators from federal, state, and local levels. Together, they'll focus on figuring out the person or people responsible for the murders of nearly a dozen victims. Back in December, when Harrison was just weeks into his new role as police commissioner, he pledged to make the case a priority.
Using the appropriate sciences that we might not have used in the past, I think is going to help out with the investigation a whole lot going down the road.
The months following had seen the release of Shannon's 911 call, along with additional information about the Gilgo Force history that we have covered. In 2023, the news so many waited for came.
This is CBS 2 News at noon.
The Suffolk County Police Department, as well as our partners in the FBI, did place one individual under arrest, and he's currently in custody at this time.
Breaking news at noon, an arrest in the Gilgo Beach murders more than a decade in the making. This is the man police have taken into custody. Investigators just giving an update moments ago. We have live team coverage this noon. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Calvi. Now on CBS 2 and streaming on CBS News New York. And this is the break in the case that families who lost loved ones have been waiting for. Police arresting a man in connection with the notorious Gilgo Beach murders, taking him into custody last night. Mary, officials are calling it a major development and a major step forward in a notorious case that has baffled law enforcement and the public for more than a decade. We know that a suspect is in custody.
Members assigned to the Gilgo Beach Task Force, which consisted of numerous detectives and investigators from the Suffolk County Police Department, as well as our partners in the FBI, did place one individual under arrest.
An announcement more than a decade in the making. Sources confirm they made an arrest Thursday night of 59-year-old Rex Heuermann. His alleged role to be revealed in court Friday afternoon. Neighbors woke up to an unimaginable revelation. The decade-long hunt for a serial killer is somehow centered here in Massapequa Park.
Rex Heuermann would eventually be charged in the original 4 Gilgo Beach victims. Investigators, following reports of a Chevy Avalanche, settled on the New York-based architect and linked burner cell phones, numerous disturbing internet searches, and finally, DNA evidence. As a high schooler, he worked as a lifeguard at Jones Beach State Park, just down the road from where his victims would later be buried.
Suffolk and Nassau police and state troopers descended on this modest house on First Avenue.
It's a shocker. I mean, it's a real eye-opener.
It's crazy. It's mind-blowing. It's, quiet Massapequa Park.
We spoke frequently, every day, and his kid is a nice kid. He's a special needs kid, and the guy's been quiet, never really bothers anybody.
Initially, many neighbors were shocked, but eventually it would come out that the large man who lived in his childhood home on the otherwise well-manicured street in Massapequa had a history of being creepy or aggressive towards neighbors.
For something like this to happen right under our nose is pretty shocking. The guy was odd and strange, but never violent.
DeVilliers says when he moved in 28 years ago, Heuermann would look over the fence and try to talk to his wife while she sunbathed in their backyard.
It happened so many times that finally I pulled him over and we had a talk.
The woman felt, quote, creeped out that Heuermann continuously looked over at her, according to her husband.
We had the talk, and it wasn't a pleasant talk, but he stopped, and he didn't argue with me or anything. He just, backed off.
Every time we walk past the house, you'd say, why aren't they fixing this house up? It's the only one in the neighborhood that looks like that. And no, there was never any answers.
Divorcing him following his arrest, his wife said she did not believe he could have done these things, and was giving him the benefit of the doubt, despite DNA conclusively linking him to 3 of the murders. Investigators would state that she and his 2 children were known to be out of the country during all known crimes and do not believe them to be involved. There are still 100 unanswered questions in the Long Island serial killer case. Chiefly, who are the victims? Numerous other cases are being run against Rex, but as of yet, he remains charged with only the Gilgo 4. Is he the single boogeyman of Long Island? Or could other unknown predators be lying low for the moment, hoping the investigative light doesn't shine on them? Until more definitive proof comes out, we may never know exactly how many highways and back roads the monster known as Lisk decided to drive around Long Island.
DA says there are probably at least 2 killers because of what they found.
I think it's the same serial killer. And as far as the speculation, we have 3, we have 2, we have 4, that's all silliness. Any homicide cop worth his salt knows that these cases are related.
I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering if this person's going to be caught.
It looks like one person. And I tell people all the time that when we do catch the person, everybody will be surprised.
You know, they say it gets easier when time goes on. Doesn't it? It doesn't.